I learned about Dan Wootton from following Johnny and Amber, and now Dan's got himself in a little hot water. Dan wrote some bad things about Johnny in the Sun, false allegations, and then allegations came out against Dan, which are actually unresolved. However, Dan has been let go from the Mail Online, from GB News, probably permanently, and he's being investigated by the British police. This person here, Katie Hopkins, who is also a media personality, well, said some things about Dan. Some pretty odd things, but also some pretty fair things. To throw it out there, I don't get political, but Dan has stated these are left-wing attacks. According to Wikipedia, Katie here is on the right. So, this is not a left-wing journalist attacking the opposite side. Anyway, let's see what she has to say.
Dan Wootton has always been protected, but no one could ever know why, unless you knew. He was protected by Murdoch. Look at him. He's about as intelligent as my thumb. In fact, my thumb is more intelligent, and yet he's been preserved, and yet he's been kept on, and somehow he grew up the ranks, and somehow he ended up fronting up something on GB News when he's about as thick as the left wing of my labia.
Well, if you caught that last part, that was very interesting. Dan's about as smart as the left wing of her labia. Kinda awkward, but she said it. But also, I guess, kind of funny. So, her theory is, like the theory goes with Amber, somebody on the very top of the pyramid is giving protection. That could be. I'm not sure exactly how smart Dan is as far as intellectual intelligence, fact checking, things like that, what his high school calculus tests were. But, seems like he is someone who just latches on to the juiciest news and says whatever he can to make it as big as possible, no matter who it hurts.
Like, proper Laurance Fox, bless him, stood by Dan Wootton, right? So when Dan Wootton was in the shit for allegedly trying to Laurance Fox stood by him, obviously spoke to him on a daily basis, obviously supported him and encouraged him and told him everything would be okay, lent him his lawyers because he's got cash because he heads up Reclaim and people donated to that, whatever, and lent him whatever else. Oh, he started up a fundraiser, I think, to try and help Dan Wootton. So Laurance Fox did all of this for Dan Wootton to try and stand by Dan Wootton. What happened when Laurance was in the shit at GB News? Dan Wootton went, I think Laurance Fox is despicable.
Great point. Okay, she keeps saying Dan Wootton. I say Wootton. Whatever it is, I'm not super concerned. Great point, though. Alright, so Fox, who's in some heat for saying some comments about a female journalist, stood by Dan, and Dan then said, well, you know what, Fox? Hot water for you now, so bye-bye. I guess that sounds consistent with what Little Miss Mera did to Dan. Now Dan's in trouble, and Little Miss Mera is just hanging out in Spain, but she doesn't support Dan. You don't see a statement. Dan's a good guy. He would never do that. He's my friend. He wrote the allegations about Johnny for me. Nope. Silence. So it seems like we've got similar personality types here, not wanting to help each other. Not surprising.
I think what he said was completely wrong. I think he's misogynistic, he's sexist, and I did not think it was funny. And in that moment, I was just caught off guard. And so I didn't know which way to react. And so he's disgusting and completely threw Laurance under the bus in order to self-preserve. That's Dan Wootton all over. I've known it for 2 decades. I always thought and knew he was a C-U-N-T that did certain things for people in order to retain favour within the Murdoch family.
Well, Katie likes to talk about female private parts a little bit because she just mentioned that one again about Dan. But I'm just passing along the news to you. I'm not saying it, but I won't complain. Freedom of speech and all that.
So Laurance Fox got his text messages between him and Dan going, oh my God, that was so fun. And Dan going, yes, it was. with it, smiley face, and that's what fucked Dan Wootton over, was Laurance Fox basically saying, you just chucked me under the bus, mate, after I stood by you. Here you go, and posted it to Twitter. And it was the most glorious thing. I love that Laurance did it. Laurance knows he's buggered anyway. Laurance is ultimately now screwed because they will not stop coming for Laurance Fox. From a litigation perspective, he's so screwed. And it's why I want to get in touch with them to try and help him with advice that I know personally. But what I love is that because Dan was so deeply, deeply spineless, Laurance decided, no, mate, you're coming with me.
Right. So the theory is, if Dan would have just apologized, maybe he'd be on GB News right now, but Laurance Fox made it clear that Dan was laughing along with him. Although Dan didn't say it, well, it was pretty obvious Dan found it funny. For the record, I don't think it was worth suspending over. What they said was, I guess, unprofessional for the news or something like that. But, I don't know, man. Seems like a lot of trouble for saying a few things. But I digress. That's just my silly little opinion. Let me know what you think in the comments. Doing shoutouts, special thanks, things like that. If you're not subscribed here, consider it. If you don't, I'll be sad, but I'll get over it. See you next time.